There is an application for new technology for fiscal year 2018. It is not yet FDA approved, but it is anticipate getting approval before July 1st, 2017. And to discuss the clinical issues of this, I would like to introduce William Cavanaugh, the Chief Operating Officer and Chief Scientific Officer for IsoRay Medical Incorporated.
Thank you, Pat, and thank you, everybody. I've said it's been interesting this morning and even a little bit of fun watching how you guys do what you do. I'm Bill Cavanaugh. I'm with IsoRay. I'm actually here on behalf of both IsoRay Medical and GammaTile LLC, which is a collaborative of physicians working on what we are calling the GammaTile, and I'll explain more about what GammaTile is, why it's distinct, and potentially has the potential to change the way we look at radiation therapy inside the cranium. There is, as stated already, there is currently no unique ICD-10 PCS code to capture the use of GammaTile, and as Pat said, we have applied for an NTAP. The clinical issue, the clinical space we're trying to address here are recurrent, we're saying broadly intracranial neoplasms, but colloquially we would say recurrent brain cancers. The brain cancers can either be primary or metastatic. You can see the 50,000 cases per year recurrent metastatic brain cancers. These are the cancers that originate from the breast, from the lung, from the renal cell carcinomas, melanomas, others that cannot be controlled in their primary setting. They metastasize. They have a propensity to get into the brain for whatever reason, still a mystery. But once they get into the brain, they can become a challenge. Many can be addressed first time through. When they recur, they become a real problem, as you might imagine. Because wide surgical excision of brain cancers is not always possible, adjuvant therapies are very frequently employed. Adjuvant therapies are to assist in the control of the cancer when surgery is just not always complete. A complete excision is not possible. Adjuvants in the treatment of brain cancers can be either chemotherapeutic or radiotherapeutic. Chemotherapy-based, you're all familiar with that. Radiation, of course, works to a completely different mechanism from chemotherapy. Chemotherapy is hindered badly by the difficulty in venously placed chemotherapeutic agents to cross into the brain, to get therapeutically meaningful levels inside the brain to kind of mop up or clean up cancer cells that are left behind in the way that's much practiced for other cancers. There have been attempts to place chemotherapy intracranially, and these have met with varying success. Radiation, on the other hand, can be employed either externally, and these are with the, I'm sure everyone here is familiar with the clinical linear accelerator, the large machines that live mostly in basements of medical centers that are used as patients move through. They aim a very high energy gamma irradiation at a patient from the outside. They're very carefully done. This is 99% of radiation oncology in this country. However, there are three key drawbacks to external beam radiation in this setting, in the recurrent brain cancer. Number one, the time delay between the surgical removal of this cancer and the application of ionizing or therapeutic radiation. Secondly, the fact that the other brain structures will be dosed by radiation. The brain in general does not like ionizing radiation. It's protected considerably from it. And if areas of brain are dosed that are not intended to be in the therapeutic target, that creates problems. Thirdly, clinical linear accelerators are very large capital equipment. They require significant investment, maintenance, staffing, so they're geographically centered. So many people oftentimes cannot get access to external beam therapy, or they may not be able to conclude based on their logistical problems, such as employment. Internal radiation we call brachytherapy. These are the Greek roots of the words close and far. This being close, brachytherapy. You may have heard of it, something of a renaissance of brachytherapy, which was the original form of radiation therapy, by the way. In prostate cancer some years ago, brachytherapy became very in vogue again to treat localized prostate cancers. Brain brachytherapy has been attempted for the very reasons I imply, that it can be done quickly, it can be done with very large doses of radiation to a therapeutic target, very little to unintended adjacent tissues, which is highly desirable in the brain. However, it was fraught with a number of difficulties that have led to the fact that it's barely even practiced, brain brachytherapy, that is. The solution, we believe, and what we're trying to propose as a novel approach to radiation therapy, a novel technique, we simply don't know of anything like it, is this, and this is the gamma tile. What you're seeing here, and again, lacking a pointer, the strands you're seeing have individual sources with cesium-131 present in them. Cesium-131 is a radionuclide. It's an isotope. It's an X-ray emitter, very low energy. This is what you have to keep in mind, is that the radiation coming off of each of the seeds in here, and there's a little maybe more schematic illustration of the seeds inside the tile. The radiation emanating that's therapeutically meaningful is really just around that seed. It's just enough of a dose cloud to reach the dose cloud coming off the next seed. It's very low energy. We call these in the tens of kilo electron volts. These are not very energetic. Two ramifications to that fact. One is that spacing becomes critical. If one cannot space these sources approximately a centimeter from each other in both these dimensions you see, X and Y, delivering what we call uniform or homogeneous radiation becomes difficult. So the gamma tile solves this for us by holding these in place in a collagen tile. Now this collagen is actually a dural repair collagen, so it's been used, I think, over 1 million times inside the cranium to repair the dura mater at invasive craniotomy. And so using this as a carrier gets us something that's been used extensively inside the brain that takes these sources very nicely, spaces them apart perfectly well, and thirdly provides this third-dimensional Z axis offset that you can see represented at the top as the depth of the gamma tile. That spacing that takes the seeds off the brain's surface we think is highly clinically meaningful, and I'll try to show you why that is. Here's the placement of one of the tiles. The application of gamma tile takes about 3 minutes per the clinical studies to apply. The surgeon, once he's got, or she has her or his target exposed and cleared out, the gamma tile is very quickly placed in there. The collagen becomes translucent once it's liquid, once it's hit water there. So you can't see it, but it's in there, and we know it's in there because we can see the sources after the fact, and we can model the dose that's been delivered after the fact as well. And we, from experience, we know the spacing of these seeds, as I've explained in X, Y, and Z as we think of it, maintains itself over the therapeutic life of these cesium-131 decay, the therapeutic lifetime of the cesium-131. Here's a representation of the radiation dose. Delivered by different modalities, as I explained earlier. With external beam radiation therapy, there's an impossible to avoid overdosing of areas that are not necessarily oncologic targets. So, as you'll see in the leftmost representation of conformal 3D external beam radiation therapy, which is external beam radiation therapy, you can see the target in the center where the green positive sign is. And these are also, that one's, no, those are markers, but you'll see the red radiation dose in the very center. The oncologist has drawn the target around the resection cavity. You'll see the red being very high. We're up into the, I can't read it for you, 7,000 or 8,000 rads, which is very, very, very intense radiation therapy. Now the green and the blue, we're getting down into 4,000, 3,000 rads. That's 40 or 30 gray, which is that's near therapeutic radiation. That is intense radiation, and you can see. And again, these are areas, but you have to think of a volume of brain taking that dose that's completely uninvolved with the malignancy. So that is a side effect machine, frankly. And as much as there's been attempts to restrict that dose taken by uninvolved brain, it's impossible to avoid. But you see the gamma tile, we get this very, very compact dose that's very desirable. The gamma tile also begins right at the time of surgery. You can see the surgeon throw that gamma tile in there. And the problem is with external beam radiation delivery, there's a 3-week period required for recovery. During that time, regrowth of tumor can happen, does happen, as represented by that enhancing rim you can see around a resection bed within 3 weeks of surgery. There have been some trials done by physicians who were involved in developing this therapy at the Barrow, in the Barrow Neuroscience Institute in Phoenix, as well as some clinicians from the University of Arizona. Excuse me. Very quickly, number of histologies represented here. These are all recurrent cancers. Recurrent meningiomas, recurrent gliomas, high-grade gliomas, and recurrent brain metastasis. These are the representations. These are the density, probability density functions or Kaplan-Meier functions showing the risk of recurrence across these 3 histologies. All of these patients represented by the blue line show each one of those drops is a failure of a patient who has underwent surgery and radiation therapy, conventional external beam radiation therapy. The red line are the same patients who have been retreated. They've been re-put into the study. It's a very odd way of looking at a clinical trial, but in any event, you're looking at patients who had 100% local failure very quickly after standard of care therapy, who went into be salvaged with surgery plus gamma tile, and you can see in each instance these patients are faring much better with the gamma tile approach, even though we're in the recurrent setting with salvage therapy. Important side effects related to radiation therapy of the brain oftentimes center around what we call radiation necrosis. That is too much brain tissue getting too much radiation, leading to a necrotic event, which has to be excavated, acraniotomy, leading to a further operation. You can see the numbers favor the gamma tile approach over the reported numbers for both external beam and previous attempts at brachytherapy. We are convinced, and the clinicians are convinced, that this is due to, again, the array of seeds being very careful, spaced in both dimensions, as I showed earlier, to avoid hot spots where seeds are too close together, and also with the offset from the brain. We think it exposes the brain to really the perfect cloud of radiation, our target inside the brain, that just can't be achieved with any other method that anybody has developed to this point in time. In summary, we think gamma tile provides treatment option for patients without other options. As I explained, these are recurrent patients. Oftentimes, they've already taken enough radiation that they are no longer candidates for radiation that they may sorely need therapeutically. We believe we can show gamma tile reduces the rate of tumor recurrence, reduces complication rates, reduces need for reoperation, and keeping in mind that external beam radiation delivery is performed over a period of potentially weeks. This is a one-time application in the operating room. And based on the fact that we get the immediate delivery of radiation therapy conformally, right where it's needed in very high doses, with very little dose to other structures, we think that that's a further advantage to the approach. Hope I didn't cover that too quickly, but any questions?
Hi, I'm Linda Holtzman from Clarity Coding. Can you speak again to any other current forms of brachytherapy in the brain? I know that there have been liquid brachytherapy, and I saw in your background document that you said in the past people used to sow the radioactive seeds into the cavity. Is anybody doing any form of brain brachytherapy today?
Yes, and you're correct. There, between what we call interstitial placement of sources, that takes several different manifestations. That's all the way from taking miniature sources and really depositing them into a resection cavity. Some people put them into strands and kind of lace them around the resection cavity and kind of build their own implant, kind of like do it yourself.
Understand.
if you want to think of it that way, is where gamma tau being kind of a structured approach, the on-the-fly approach being a different way of looking at it. Those implants have been done and still are done. They've just achieved very little in the way of adoption because they take an awful long time in the operating room to put together in the brain. There's issues, operative time equals infection rates, and it's still impossible really to get those sources placed in that freehand fashion perfectly aligned and off of the brain. Liquid brachytherapy, just to finish answering your question, liquid brachytherapy was really considered to be the only way to get a uniform dose to the brain, but that required a temporary implant of a catheter, which was instilled with radioactive solution, created a lot of problems that also prevented its adoption.
So if I understand you correctly, there are, some cowboys out there who are doing physician-modified versions of brachytherapy in the brain right now. But generally speaking, there really isn't any other kind of brain brachytherapy going on today except for, a handful of cowboys.
That's correct. So most all, and there have been other, I won't even drive into the history of this, but there have been lots and lots and lots of approaches because, again, this conceptual appeal of doing this is incredible. The question is, how do you do it right? So yes, many approaches have been abandoned. There's several, and we estimate less than 10 radiation oncologists out of about 4,000 in the U.S. are trying to cowboy this through, and that's been the status quo for probably the last 10 years at least, or so.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Thank you. Operator, do we have any clinical questions from the phone lines?
All lines are unmuted.
Hearing none, then we will move to our coding options. If you'll turn in your handouts to page 28, and you will see that the current coding facilities can capture the use of cesium-131 collagen implants using existing code 3EOQ005, and that's introduction of other anti-neoplastic into cranial cavity and brain open approach. Option 1 would be to continue using this code. Option 2 would be to create a unique code to capture the use of cesium-131 collagen implants in adjuvant radiation therapy. We would create new qualifier 6, cesium-131, that you see on the table at the bottom of 28, and table 3EO of the administration section. We would use the existing fourth character body system, cranial cavity and brain, and the existing sixth character substance, anti-neoplastic, and we would add the new qualifier for the approach open. Option 3, which is found on page 29, would be create a new code in the X new technology section, and you'll see how we would add that into XOO, and you would see that we would add the brain open and then number 1 for the anti-neoplastic, and then 3 for the new technology group 3. CMS currently has recommendations for number 3 to put a new code in the new technology section. However, we would like to hear public comments on that. And in the meantime, you would continue to use the existing ICD-10 PCS code to capture this technology. So we'll take comments from the floor now.
Nellie Leon, she's saying, since Maddie opened up the door a little bit earlier, there is currently room in the 3EO table, the introduction, and that's where we have some of the other brachytherapy qualifiers. So my recommendation would be that so long as we have room and we can sort of group these things together, it would be easier to find if we would put it under what you have as option 2.
Thank you, Nellie.
Lynn Keene, Keene Consulting. I also agree that it should be option 2 because the way it's laid out, it seems like this would be a unique identifiable code even if the new technology add-on payment is approved. So option 2.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from the floor?
I just have a question for the procedures. From the description, it's so invasive, so I'm a little confused why we classify under administration and introduction of the material. Did you actually implant this radium into the brain?
Yes. You want to describe the approach to surgery first?
Yes, so this is an open craniotomy. This is your traditional craniotomy. And yeah, following surgical incision of the tumor, the mass that the surgeon is after, these tiles are placed in permanently.
So would it be appropriate we have to assign additional craniotomy followed by administration?
Yes, you would code the procedure performed first, and then this would be an additional code to capture this procedure.
I would go with option 3 with these procedures.
Okay. Okay, operator, do we have any comments or questions from the phone lines?
All lines are unmuted.
This is Sue Bowman from AHIMA. I would support option 2 along with Nellie's and Lynn's comments. I think it would be good to keep this technology with other anti-neoplastic and brachytherapy substances that are included in Table 3E0.
Thank you, Sue. Any other phone line comments? Okay, we have another comment from the floor.
Linda Holtzman again, another delayed reaction here. I like option 2 also. Since there is room, I think it makes sense to put it there because that's where I would look for it. My comment is actually something else, though, that I almost wonder if we should have either instead of